They called me a fat pig before they knew my name. I stood there in the marble entryway of a house bigger than any building I'd ever worked in, watching my son's new wife's family size me up like I was something tracked in on their shoes. Her mother actually wrinkled her nose. Her brother smirked and whispered something to his girlfriend that made her laugh behind her hand. And her father, tall, silver-haired, expensive suit, he looked right through me like I was invisible. I thought about leaving. I thought about turning around and walking back to the cab I could barely afford. But my son Marcus was watching, and I wanted him to be proud of me. Just once. Before I dive in, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. And if you enjoy stories like this, please like and subscribe. It helps me keep sharing more. The invitation had come 3 days earlier. Marcus called while I was finishing my shift at the factory. 27 years I'd worked that floor. 27 years of grease under my fingernails and the smell of hot metal in my hair. He said his new wife, Camilla, wanted me to meet her family. A dinner party. Something formal. I could hear the hesitation in his voice when he said formal, like he was already apologizing for me. I asked what I should wear. He paused too long before saying, "Just wear something nice, Dad." I bought a suit from the discount store on 5th. It didn't fit quite right in the shoulders, but it was the best I could do. I even got my hair cut. The barber tried to do something with the gray, but there's only so much you can hide when you're 63 and every year shows on your face. When I arrived at the address Marcus gave me, I thought I'd written it down wrong. The house sat behind iron gates in a neighborhood where the lawns looked like golf courses. A valet actually opened my cab door. I tipped him the last 10 I had in my wallet and immediately regretted it because I didn't know if I'd need it later. The foyer smelled like lilies and money. Real hardwood beneath my feet. A chandelier overhead that probably cost more than my annual salary. Camilla appeared first, floating down a curved staircase in a dress that shimmered. She'd always been kind to me in the few times we'd met, but now her smile seemed tighter, more rehearsed. Marcus stood beside her in a suit that actually fit, looking like someone I barely recognized. My boy, who used to come home covered in dirt from playing in the creek behind our old apartment. Now he wouldn't meet my eyes. Then came the family. Her mother descended like royalty, diamonds at her throat catching the light. Her name was Vivian, and she extended 2 fingers for me to shake like she expected me to kiss them. Her brother Raphael followed with his model girlfriend draped on his arm. And finally her father Richard. He was the kind of man who'd never done manual labor in his life. Soft hands, confident posture. The way he looked at me made my stomach turn. Not with anger, with assessment. Like he was calculating my net worth and finding it sadly lacking. That's when Camilla's mother said it. Not directly to me, but to her daughter in a voice just loud enough to carry. "Such a sad thing we have to endure this for you, darling." Her father chuckled, actually chuckled. Raphael didn't even try to hide his grin. And Marcus. God, Marcus just looked at the floor. I felt heat crawl up my neck. Not embarrassment. Not anymore. I'd been embarrassed too many times in my life. This was something older, deeper. The same feeling I got when Marcus's mother left us because she said she deserved better than a factory worker. The same feeling I got every time I couldn't afford the field trips or the new sneakers or the college I wanted to send him to. Camilla touched my arm. "I'm so glad you could come, William." Her voice was gentle, but her eyes were apologetic, like she already knew what kind of evening this would be. Dinner was served in a dining room with a table long enough to seat 20. I was placed at the far end, across from Raphael and his girlfriend. Marcus and Camilla sat in the middle. Her parents held court at the head. The first course arrived on plates so white they seemed to glow, some kind of fish with foam on top. I watched the others to see which fork to use. Raphael noticed and elbowed his girlfriend. She snorted into her wine. The conversation flowed around me like I wasn't there. They talked about their vacation home in Tuscany, about the charity gala they were planning, about Raphael's new position at the family's investment firm. Richard dominated the discussion with the ease of someone who'd never been interrupted in his life. He talked about market projections and acquisition strategies and mergers I didn't understand. Every few minutes his eyes would flick to me, just to make sure I knew I didn't belong. Then Vivian turned her attention my way. "So, William," her voice dripped with false sweetness. "Marcus tells us you work with your hands. In manufacturing," I said. "Factory work." She nodded slowly like I'd confirmed something unfortunate. "How noble." Raphael barely contained his laugh. His girlfriend didn't bother. I gripped my fork tighter. The metal felt familiar, real, not like the crystal glasses or the fine china or any of this performance. Marcus still wouldn't look at me. That hurt more than anything they could say. Before I could respond, Richard cleared his throat. He set down his wine glass with deliberate precision. "You know, I've always believed honest work has value." His tone suggested he believed no such thing. It takes all kinds to make the world function. The condescension was so thick I could taste it. But I smiled. Thanked him. Because what else could I do? The second course came, then the third, each one more elaborate than the last, each one another opportunity for them to demonstrate how far above me they were. Vivian asked about my neighborhood with the kind of curiosity people reserve for discussing zoo animals. Raphael made a joke about blue-collar workers that made everyone except Camilla laugh. And through it all, Marcus said nothing. He cut his food into smaller and smaller pieces and pretended to be fascinated by the pattern on his plate. I wanted to leave. God, I wanted to stand up and walk out. But something kept me in that chair. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was the memory of all those nights I worked double shifts so Marcus could have a better life than I did. Maybe I just wanted to see how much worse it could get. Then Richard's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and his entire face changed. The color drained. His hand shook slightly as he set the phone down. His eyes lifted slowly and found mine across the table. For the first time all evening, he really looked at me. Not through me. At me. "Wait," he said quietly. His voice had lost all its confidence. "You're..." The room went silent. Everyone stared. "You're William Grant." It wasn't a question. It was a realization, and from the way his face had gone pale, it was a realization that terrified him. I didn't say anything, just held his gaze. Watched him connect the pieces. The factory I'd worked at for 27 years. The company that had just been acquired last month. The acquisition Richard's firm had celebrated. The new CEO they'd installed. The restructuring that was about to begin. "You're the new CEO," Richard whispered. His fork clattered against his plate. "Of Grant Industrial. My company." I let the silence stretch. Let them all stare. Let Marcus finally look up with wide, confused eyes. Then I smiled. Small. Calm. And for the first time all evening, genuine. Funny thing about working your way up from the factory floor, you learn everyone's name. You learn how the company really runs. And when the board decides they want someone who actually understands the business instead of some investment banker who's never built anything in his life, they remember the guy who put in 27 years. Richard's acquisition hadn't bought him a company. It had bought him me. And tomorrow morning I started my new position, with full authority over budgets, personnel, and partnerships, including the consulting contract his firm desperately needed to stay afloat. The one I'd be reviewing first thing. Would you have stayed quiet if you were in my position, or would you have spoken up sooner? The silence that followed felt like something physical pressing down on the room. I watched Richard's throat work as he tried to swallow. Vivian's perfect smile had frozen into something brittle and cracked. Raphael sat motionless, his wine glass halfway to his lips like someone had pressed pause on him. Only Camilla seemed unsurprised, a small, knowing curve at the corner of her mouth that made me wonder exactly how much she'd known all along. Marcus broke first. "Dad?" His voice came out small, confused. "You never said anything about a promotion." I turned to my son slowly, letting him see the expression I'd kept hidden all evening. The tiredness. The hurt. "You never asked, Marcus. You called 3 days ago to invite me to dinner. Not once did you ask how I was doing. Not once did you ask about work. You just told me to wear something nice and show up." The words landed like stones. He flinched, but I wasn't angry. Not at him. Just disappointed in a way that somehow hurt worse. Richard found his voice again, though it came out strangled. "I had no idea. Mr. Grant, I sincerely apologize for any misunderstanding." His hands were trembling now. "We've been waiting for confirmation on the new leadership structure. The board was very secretive about the appointment." I nodded slowly. They were. For good reason. Grant Industrial's previous management had a problem with leaks. Information going to competitors. Strategic plans somehow ending up in the hands of firms trying to undercut our bids. I let my eyes drift meaningfully toward Richard. The board wanted someone they could trust. Someone who'd bled for that company. Richard's face went from pale to gray. His firm had been one of those competitors. I'd seen the documents myself during the transition meetings. Proposals that matched our internal strategies too perfectly to be coincidence. Contracts lost because someone somewhere had whispered our numbers to the other side. I didn't have proof it was Richard's firm specifically. Not yet. But the way his hands shook told me I was close. Vivian recovered faster than her husband. She was a survivor, I could tell. The kind of woman who'd learned to pivot when the wind changed direction. "William," she said, her voice now warm as honey. "What a remarkable achievement. You must be so proud. Going from the factory floor to the executive suite. Such an inspiring story." I took a sip of water. Let her words hang there. Watched her smile grow more desperate. "It is quite a journey," I agreed. 27 years of 12-hour shifts. Missed birthdays. Missed holidays. My wife left because she was tired of struggling while I poured everything into a company that treated me like I was replaceable. I glanced at Marcus. He was staring at his plate again. I kept going because my voice was steady now and I needed him to hear this. I kept going because I had a son who deserved better than what I had. I worked every overtime shift they offered, took night classes at community college for my business degree, learned every aspect of that company from the ground up. When the floor supervisor retired, I applied for his job. When the operations manager position opened, I applied for that too. Every single time I was told I didn't have the right background, the right connections, the right image. The room was silent except for the soft clink of ice in someone's water glass. Raphael had set his wine down and was trying to look anywhere but at me. So I stayed on the floor, I continued, and I watched as they brought in consultants who didn't know the difference between a lathe and a mill. I watched profits drop because decisions were being made by people who'd never set foot in production. I watched good workers get laid off while executives gave themselves bonuses. And when the company finally hit crisis and the board panicked, when they realized all their expensive consultants couldn't save them, they came to me. Richard's jaw was clenched so tight I could see the muscle jumping. They asked me what was wrong, what needed to change. So I told them. I laid out a complete restructuring plan, efficiency improvements, cost savings that didn't involve destroying people's livelihoods, new partnerships with suppliers I'd built relationships with over decades, a 5-year growth strategy based on actually understanding our market instead of chasing trends. I leaned back in my chair. It felt good to finally say this out loud, to finally let someone see what the last 27 years had built toward. The board voted unanimously to make me CEO. The promotion was announced internally last week. Public announcement goes out tomorrow morning at 9. I'll be on the business news by noon. And every consulting firm, every investor, every competitor who thought Grant Industrial was finished will have to deal with me now. Camilla was smiling openly now. She reached over and squeezed Marcus's hand. "Your father's incredible," she said softly. "I've known for 2 weeks. He told me the night we got engaged. Made me promise not to say anything until it was official." Marcus's head snapped toward her. "You knew?" She nodded. "I wanted you to tell your family yourself, in your own time. But when my mother insisted on this dinner, when she started making those comments about your father's background, I thought maybe it was time they learned something about assumptions. Smart girl. I liked her more every minute. Vivian was doing calculations behind her eyes. I could practically see her reworking the evening, reframing every insult into a misunderstanding. "Richard, we should discuss that contract renewal," she said suddenly. "I'm sure William would be open to a conversation about our firm's ongoing partnership." "Would you be?" I said. It wasn't a question. Richard swallowed hard. "We've had a very productive relationship with Grand Industrial for the past 3 years. My predecessor signed that contract," I said. "I wasn't consulted. I've been reviewing all existing partnerships as part of the transition, making sure they're still in the company's best interests." The threat hung in the air like smoke. Raphael finally found his voice, though it came out too loud. "This is ridiculous. You can't just come in here and act like you're some kind of royalty because you got a promotion. You're still just a factory worker playing dress-up." "William," Camila said sharply, but I held up a hand. "It's fine." I looked at Raphael directly. "You're right. I am a factory worker. I know what it's like to actually build something instead of just moving money around and calling it work. I know what it's like to earn respect instead of inheriting it. And I know what it feels like to be looked down on by people who've never struggled for anything in their lives." Raphael's face flushed red. His girlfriend touched his arm, but he shook her off. "You think you're better than us now? You think one promotion makes you our equal?" "No," I said quietly. "I don't think I'm your equal. I think I'm your superior. Not because of the title, because I know the value of what I have. You've spent your whole life having everything handed to you. I've spent mine earning every single thing I've got." The room erupted. Vivian gasped. Richard stood up so fast his chair scraped against the floor. Raphael looked like he wanted to jump across the table. And Marcus. God. Marcus finally looked at me with something other than embarrassment. Something like recognition. Maybe even respect. Before anyone could speak, the dining room door opened. A young woman in a staff uniform stepped in, looking uncomfortable. "I'm sorry to interrupt," she said quietly. "Mr. Whitfield, there's a phone call for you." The caller said it was urgent. Richard's face went from red to white. He excused himself with as much dignity as he could manage and left the room. The moment he was gone, Vivian turned her full attention on me. Whatever animosity had been there before was now covered with a thick layer of desperation. "William, I hope you understand we meant no offense earlier. We simply didn't know who you were." "You're absolutely right," I said. "You didn't know who I was. You just assumed. And that tells me everything I need to know about who you are." She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. But no words came out. What would you have said in her position, knowing everything you'd revealed about yourself was being judged? Marcus stood up. His napkin fell to the floor. "Dad, can we talk?" "Outside?" I nodded. We stepped out onto a stone terrace overlooking gardens lit with subtle ground lights. The air was cool and clean. Nothing like the suffocating atmosphere inside. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then Marcus said, "I'm sorry. I should have known. I should have asked." "You should have defended me," I said quietly. "In there. When they mocked me. When they treated me like I was nothing. You just sat there." His face crumpled. "I know. I was ashamed. Not of you. Of myself. Of the fact that I've spent so much time trying to fit into Camilla's world that I forgot where I came from. Forgot what you sacrificed for me." I put my hand on his shoulder. Felt him lean into it the way he used to when he was small. "You don't have to choose between worlds, Marcus. You just have to remember your foundation. Remember who built it." He nodded, wiping at his eyes. Camilla appeared in the doorway. Her face was serious now. "You both should come back inside. My father just got off the phone. He looks like he's seen a ghost." We followed her back into the dining room. Richard stood at the head of the table, his phone still clutched in his hand. His face had gone beyond pale into something almost translucent. That was the CFO of Grant Industrial, he said hoarsely. They've just informed me that our consulting contract is under immediate review. All payments suspended pending investigation into potential conflicts of interest and information breaches. He looked at me with something close to terror. They said the new CEO specifically requested the audit. I met his eyes and smiled. Just doing my job, Richard. Making sure the company's interests are protected. Turns out there are some very interesting patterns in how our bid information ended up in competitor hands. Right around the same times your firm was advising us on strategy. Funny how that works. Would you have pushed for the investigation, or would you have let it go? Richard collapsed back into his chair like his strings had been cut. The phone slipped from his hand onto the table with a dull thud against the polished wood. Vivian reached for him but stopped halfway, her hand hovering in the air as if she'd forgotten what comfort looked like. Raphael's smirk had vanished completely, replaced by the dawning realization that his family's fortune might be crumbling in real time. I remained standing, calm, watching them process what I'd known for weeks. The investigation had been my first priority after the board vote. Not out of revenge, out of necessity. Grant Industrial had bled millions over the past 3 years, and every trail led back to firms like Richard's. Consultants who sold strategy to us in the morning and whispered it to our competitors by afternoon. You can't prove anything, Richard said finally, but his voice shook. Those are serious accusations. I pulled out my phone, scrolled to a folder I'd prepared, and set it on the table in front of him. I don't make accusations I can't prove. That's discovery documents from the investigation, emails, phone records, financial transactions. Your firm received payments from 3 of our biggest competitors within days of advising us on bids for the same contracts. Either you're phenomenally unlucky with timing, or you were playing both sides. Richard stared at the phone like it might bite him. He didn't touch it, didn't need to. We both knew what was there. This will destroy us, Vivian whispered. Our reputation, everything we've built. I thought about pointing out that they'd built their empire on betrayal and stolen information, but there was no satisfaction in kicking people who were already down. Instead, I picked up my phone and slipped it back into my pocket. The investigation will take its course. If you're innocent, you have nothing to worry about. If you're not, well, actions have consequences. Camilla moved to stand beside Marcus, her hand finding his. She looked at her parents with something between pity and disappointment. You taught me that appearance was everything, that the right name, the right connections, the right address mattered more than character. I believed you for so long. Then I met Marcus, met his father, learned what it looked like when someone actually earned respect instead of demanding it. Vivian's face twisted. We gave you everything, the best schools, the best opportunities. You did, Camilla agreed, and I'm grateful. But you also taught me to look down on people who worked with their hands, to measure worth by bank accounts and zip codes. William showed me how wrong that was, how shallow. Raphael slammed his hand on the table. So what? You brought him here to humiliate us? To watch him gloat about his little promotion? Marcus stepped forward, and I felt a surge of pride at the steel in his voice. No. She brought him here because you insisted on meeting him. Because you wanted to judge him. You got exactly what you asked for, just not the way you expected. Richard finally looked up at me. His eyes were red-rimmed. What do you want? Money? We can make this go away. We have resources. For the first time all evening, I felt something close to anger. Not the hot, sharp kind. The cold, deep kind that comes from years of being underestimated. I don't want your money, Richard. I never did. I wanted your respect. Your basic human decency. The understanding that a man's worth isn't measured by the softness of his hands or the size of his house. You couldn't even give me that. So no, I don't want anything from you. I leaned forward, hands on the table. But I'll tell you what I'm going to do. The investigation continues. If it finds wrongdoing, the authorities will be notified and your firm will face consequences. If it finds nothing, your contract still won't be renewed. Grant Industrial will be working with partners who share our values, who understand that business is built on trust and integrity, not manipulation and theft. And as for tonight, I'm going to leave. I'm going to go back to my small apartment in my unfashionable neighborhood. I'm going to sleep well, knowing I earned everything I have honestly. And tomorrow morning at 9, when the announcement goes public, I'm going to step into my new office and start rebuilding a company that people like you nearly destroyed. Vivian made a sound like a wounded animal. Raphael stared at his plate. Richard just looked old, broken. I turned to Marcus and Camilla. You two should come by this weekend. I'll make dinner. Nothing fancy, just honest food and honest conversation. Marcus's eyes were bright. We'd love that, Dad. Camilla kissed his cheek, then crossed to me and hugged me. Thank you, she whispered, for showing me what strength really looks like. I patted her back gently. You already knew. You just needed permission to trust what you saw. As I walked toward the door, Raphael's voice followed me, bitter and small. You're nobody. You'll always be nobody. Factory trash playing CEO. I stopped, turned back slowly. The entire room held its breath. You're right about one thing, I said quietly. I'm nobody special. I'm just a man who worked hard and refused to give up. But you know what the difference is between us, Raphael? I became somebody despite every obstacle in my way. You've had every advantage and still managed to become nothing. The words hung in the air like a verdict. I walked out through that marble entryway, past the chandelier and the fresh lilies and the valet who looked confused about whether to open the door for me. The night air hit my face cool and clean. I heard footsteps behind me. Marcus. He caught up, breathing hard. Dad, wait. I can drive you home. I smiled. I'd like that. We walked to his car in silence. It was new, expensive, the kind of thing I'd never been able to buy him growing up. But he drove carefully, like I'd taught him in our old beat-up sedan when he was 16. Halfway home he spoke. I spent so long being embarrassed about where we came from, about the apartment, about your job, about not having what other kids had. I thought if I could just get far enough away, become successful enough, I could forget. I understand, I said. Most people would. But you can't forget, Marcus. And you shouldn't want to. Everything you are comes from those struggles. From watching your mother leave and choosing to stay anyway. From seeing me work doubles and learning what dedication looks like. You can build on that foundation or you can abandon it. But if you abandon it, you'll end up hollow. Like Raphael. Like Richard. Rich and respected and completely empty. He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. How did you do it? Work all those years knowing they looked down on you? Knowing you were worth more than they saw? I was quiet for a moment, watching the streetlights blur past. Because I didn't do it for them. I did it for you. To show you that where you start doesn't determine where you finish. That dignity isn't given, it's chosen. Every day, every shift, every time someone dismissed me, I chose to believe I was worth more than their judgment. Eventually, reality caught up with my belief. We pulled up outside my building. It looked small and tired compared to where we'd just been. But the lights were warm in the windows. Mrs. Chen on the second floor was playing her radio. Mr. Okoye's daughter's bicycle was locked to the railing. Real people living real lives. Marcus looked at the building like he was seeing it for the first time. Can I come up? Make sure you get in okay? I laughed. I've been getting in okay for 63 years. But yes, come up. We climbed the stairs together. I unlocked my door, and we stepped into my small living room. 2 decades of memories and furniture that didn't match and photos on every surface. Marcus as a baby. Marcus's first day of school. His graduation. My wedding photo before everything fell apart. Marcus picked up his graduation picture. You kept this front and center. Always, I said. It's my proudest moment. He set it down carefully. Not tonight. Tonight was just a correction. You graduating, becoming a good man despite everything, that's the achievement. He hugged me then, tight and desperate like when he was small and afraid of thunderstorms. I'm sorry, Dad, for all of it, for being ashamed, for not defending you, for forgetting what you gave up. I held him and let him cry. Sometimes sons need to break before they can rebuild themselves into men. It's okay, I said. You're here now. That's what matters. When he finally pulled back, his face was blotchy, but peaceful. What happens now? With Richard's firm, with everything? The truth comes out, I said. Consequences happen, and Grant Industrial moves forward with integrity. Some people will call it revenge. They'll say I used my position to settle personal scores, but they'll be wrong. I'm just doing what should have been done years ago, protecting the company and the workers who depend on it. Marcus nodded slowly. And us? You and me? We move forward too. You keep building your life with Camilla. I keep building the company, and maybe we have Sunday dinners. Nothing fancy, just time together. He smiled. It was the first real smile I'd seen from him all night. I'd like that. After he left, I stood at my window looking out at the city. Somewhere out there, Richard was probably making phone calls. Vivian was probably calculating how to salvage their reputation. Raphael was probably drinking and pretending this was all beneath him. But I wasn't thinking about them. I was thinking about all the workers at Grant Industrial who'd struggled like I had, who'd been overlooked and underestimated, who deserved a leader who understood their lives because he'd lived them. Tomorrow the announcement would go public. Tomorrow the business world would be shocked that a factory worker had become CEO. Tomorrow the real work would begin. But tonight, I was just a father who'd taught his son a lesson about dignity, about standing firm when the world tries to make you small, about knowing your worth even when nobody else sees it. I thought about the look on Richard's face when he realized who I was, the fear, the desperation. There was no joy in it for me, just a quiet satisfaction that truth had finally surfaced, that pretense had been stripped away, that for once, the people who'd spent their lives looking down on others had been forced to look up. My phone buzzed. A text from Camilla. Thank you for tonight. Marcus needed to see you like that. Strong, unshakable. So did I. I smiled and typed back. Thank you for seeing past the assumptions, for judging people by their character instead of their address. You're going to be good for my son. Her response came quickly. He's going to be good for me, too. We both learned something tonight about where real strength comes from. I set the phone down and looked around my small apartment. Tomorrow I'd have a corner office, an executive salary, access to rooms and circles that had been closed to me my entire life. But I'd still come home here, to this neighborhood where people knew struggle, where Mrs. Chen brought me soup when I was sick and Mr. Okoye's kids shoveled my walk when it snowed, where community meant something more than networking. Because the lesson I'd learned over 27 years wasn't about climbing ladders or proving worth to people who'd never see it. It was about staying rooted, about remembering that every person has value regardless of their job title or bank balance, about treating everyone with the dignity you want for yourself. Richard and his family had spent their lives building walls, separating themselves from people they deemed beneath them, creating hierarchies where they always stood at the top. I'd spent my life building bridges, connecting with people, learning from everyone around me, rising not by pushing others down but by lifting as I climbed. In the end, walls crumble, but bridges last. That's the truth I'd carry into my new role, the truth I hoped Marcus would carry into his future, the truth that people like Richard would never understand until it was too late. I turned off the lights and went to bed. Through the thin walls I could hear the sounds of my neighbors living their lives. Laughter from the Rodriguezes, the baby crying 2 floors up, the rumble of the subway beneath us, the sounds of real people doing real things. Tomorrow I'd step into a new world, but I'd never forget where I came from. Because the greatest success isn't reaching the top. It's staying human on the way up, and treating everyone you meet like they matter, because they do. Every single one, even the ones who can't see it yet. Here's what I've learned after 63 years on this earth. Your worth isn't determined by how others see you. It's determined by how you see yourself and how you treat people when nobody's watching. Judge character, not appearance. Build bridges, not walls. And never forget that the person you look down on today might be the person looking back at you from a position of power tomorrow. Not because they sought revenge, but because they never stopped believing they deserved better. If this story resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever been underestimated because of how you looked or where you came from? How did you handle it? And if you want more stories about dignity, resilience, and quiet strength, please subscribe. It genuinely helps me continue sharing these moments with you.